So I'm really glad to be here today. Last year I was here as one of the attendees, and this year I'm here as a presenter, and it feels like a really rewarding personal experience. I have a lot of information today that I'm going to give you, so get your pens at the ready. Feel free to take pictures of my slides. I have absolutely no problem with that. You'll remember it better if you write it down, though. And what we're here today is to talk about a non-traditional approach to career discovery. So just by show of hands, how many of you know that you are in the right job, the perfect job, or your dream job? Just by show of hands. Yeah. And if you didn't put up your hand, think about somebody that you know that is, like maybe Oprah or Dr. Phil, maybe. I suspect that they are, right? How do you know that you're in your dream job? Or how do those people know? Just shout stuff out. They're motivated.
Wake up in the morning and want to go to work. Yes.
And you want to go to work? Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, what else? How else would you know?
Time flies when you're there.
Time flies, you're appreciated. Yeah, interesting, right? Enthusiastic. Yeah. Could it be, because all of those are feeling words, right? So it can be, how do we quantify that? How do we take those feeling words and turn it into something that's tangible that we can use? So that's what I'm hoping to do with you today. We taught, really underlying all of that stuff is a value system. It's a belief system, right? You're motivated to go to work. Do you actually think that Oprah wakes up every single day and says, I want to go to work? For those of you that put your hands up and said, I know I'm in my right job, do you wake up every day and say, I know I want to go to work? Yeah, I feel like I'm in my dream job, my absolute dream job, and I don't wake up every day going, I want to go to work. Most days, yes, but there are still days. So really what this comes down to is things like values and belief systems, right? Our blueprint, how we operate. It's our human needs, right? A little bit different from Maslow's. There's something called human needs psychology. We'll talk about that today. And maybe even, and probably most importantly, your tasks, what you actually do from one day to the next, because that's what the job is, isn't it? It's the tasks. It's what you actually do. It's not the title. It's not the money. It's the tasks that you do. So I want to caution you. So I'll use my notes because I have a tendency to go over, and I have a timer here. I want a whole weekend with you guys, but it's not going to happen today because I talk a lot. So get your pens ready. Last time I did a similar presentation, I did have two people that walked out of the room, one to go and quit their job, and the other one went and had a conversation with their boss that they'd been avoiding for 10 years. So I'm hoping to leave you inspired. There's two things I want you to get out of this, is to either one, learn something new that you didn't know before, or have something you already knew reinforced, because it's always good to recycle what we know, or two, feel inspired and ready to take action. So that's my hope. That's what I'm hoping you'll get out of today. So what are we going to do? So why careers? Why do we talk about careers? I'm a career and life coach. Why do I spend my time talking about careers, right? I'm a life coach by trade. So why do we talk about this? Well, our jobs are where we spend the best part of our lives. It's really our prime. Now, I say that knowing full well that I have a 73-year-old in my practice who's the oldest client that I've ever had, and they seem to have more energy than anybody that's ever come into my office, okay? And they're looking now for their dream job at 73, which I think is incredible. So our jobs are where we spend the best part of our lives. This is the best part of our day. I mean, this is when the sun is out. I mean, depending on which city you're in maybe, but not here in Calgary today. But this is the best part of the day, and when we finally hit that stage in our lives where we can make decisions and we have money, right, we're working. So you better love what you do. And so when I coach my clients, this is the conversation I have, right? So our jobs are where we spend the best part of our lives, our prime. If we are fulfilled and inspired, this extends the best part of our life, ask the 73-year-old, and we become the person that inspires others to live their best life. And so that's what I do. That's the mantra that I take out when I talk to people. This is why I focus on careers. This is why the work that all of you do in some capacity is so important, because this is where people are spending the best part of their life, right? We can't do this with blindfold on. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about why non-traditional and why go beyond passion. Because how many people believe that passion is absolutely required in the job that you do to have a dream job? Yeah. Lots, right? I think passion is important. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to talk about why non-traditional, and I'll tell you how I define traditional. So traditional in this case is defined based off of the experience that I had with career counselors, and it is not necessarily what you are doing today. We'll talk about a dream job evolution process. So in there, we'll talk about why dissatisfaction is at an all-time high, 5 myths that get in the way of people discovering this. And by the way, when we talk about career identification in this case, and that's what's in the description in your books, I just want you to transfer those words, career identification, to perfect job fit, to dream job, because it's really all the same thing. Because if I'm coming to somebody to look for a job, I'm not just looking for something that fits like a puzzle piece. I'm looking for something that inspires me. Right? And that's usually where people are coming. If they're coming to you, it's because they're dissatisfied or they have no idea where they want to go at any age. So they're looking, right? So we'll talk about what is a perfect job or job fit or dream job, right? We'll actually define that. And then we'll talk about taking inspired action. And then at the end, if we have time, which I can't promise anything, we'll have a quick question answer. But if we don't, I'm going to leave you with my contact information. I have a couple of different cards that I'm going to hand out to the room to make sure that you can reach out to me afterwards and ask questions, because like I said, I have a lot to cover today, and I want to make sure that you get it all. So here's me. We talked a little bit about my career in the introduction. Thank you for that. Didn't she have great diction? She had great diction. She can enunciate. We could all learn something from you. I worked for 3 top 50 companies, Golder Associates, WestJet, and TransCanada Pipelines. And I'm an entrepreneur. I'm the founder and CEO of Change My Life Coaching. We are a small company that is fast growing right now. We've just onboarded another 2 coaches in the last couple months. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about me, though, because I think it will explain better than my credentials and my educational experience. My personal anecdote, 1, will help you remember, but 2, it's going to explain why we have to go beyond passion and why non-traditional. So in 2002, I started school at a technical institute. You might know it, it's called SAIT. It's here in Calgary. And I decided to take the office administration diploma. I just finished a long journey of battling a drug addiction and barely passing high school. So I was a high school dropout, and then I went back to finish later. And I don't say this to sensationalize. I say it because I think it adds credibility to the story that I went through that, and here I am today having discovered my dream job. It's all possible, right? So I barely passed high school, hated every second of it for every reason that you can possibly imagine, right? And some of you know what that's like, if you're laughing. But college was going to be different. I finally chose what I was going to do, right? So I chose courses I wanted. I chose a program that I wanted. I can remember the night before packing all my stuff up. My loose leaf was already in the binders. I had my highlighters at the ready. I had flipped through some of my textbooks already, and it was just going to be different. The next day, I got off the C train. I'm walking up the stone steps of SAIT to go into my day 1 orientation. I was ready. The problem is, and being a new student, I did what all other students did when you walk into a room. You don't want to be seen, right? So you kind of slink in. You're like, everybody's watching me. I was running a little bit late. I wasn't so late that I was going to miss the orientation, but I was going to have to sit in the front, right? Sorry, guys. I was going to have to sit in the front of the room, which you don't really want to do when you're a new student, right? So at least that some of the insecurities play off that. So there I go. I decide to sneak into the back of the room, right? I knew I was going to have to sit at the front, but if I went in the back, then I felt like it'd be a little more casual, and I just wouldn't feel like people were watching me. So I go in to the room. I sneak behind a couple of other students who are having a conversation, and I find my seat and I sit down. And I'm like, okay, we're good. And then all of a sudden I get that creepy feeling that you have like somebody's watching you. And you know how it is, because it starts at the bottom of your spine and it makes you kind of want to go like this. Like, what's happening, right? And then you feel it up your neck, and if you're like me, your face starts to go red. It starts to go beet red, right? And that's what happened to me. That was my experience. So I'm sitting there and I'm like, what's going on? And I start to look around the room and I'm like, something's not right here. And I looked around. I found out after there were 110 students in that room, and I was the only guy in the room. Office administration, right? Gender stereotypes. So I could have left that room. I could have left it. Excuse me. 1 second. I could have left that room. Can you imagine what that would have been like, honestly? I'd like to say that was the only time in my life where I found myself in that situation, but I'd be lying. So I could have left the room and picked a completely different program, but I didn't. I stuck with it, and in the end, I actually loved the program, and I did very well, and I served on their academic advisory board for probably about 6 years after that, and the last 2 years of it, I chaired it, and by the time I finished, we had a 50% male-to-female ratio in that program. Okay, so then, fast forward 10 years, and there I am. I'm working in corporate Calgary. I'm making very good money. I had a team of about 20 people reporting to me on a project where we were implementing SAP. So I took that 2-year diploma and I basically put it on steroids. I knew how to use the tools, so I was going to go run circles around everybody and learn all of the theoretical stuff that I needed to learn. So I went and did that, and at that point, 10 years later, having done all of this, I was completely miserable and unfulfilled. I could not figure it out. Why would I be so unfulfilled? I'd done so well. I had checked all of the boxes, right? I was passionate about what I did. In fact, nobody that has met me can dispute my passion for everything that I put my hands on. Nobody could dispute it. All of my bosses, they're like, that's the star, that guy's passionate. Latch on to that guy, he's the one. And then I start to think, well, I'm really passionate about a lot of other things too, like politics and religion, but I shouldn't be, for me, I shouldn't have a job in any of those things to spare all of you. Okay? I shouldn't have a job in those. So do you see that passion can be fleeting? We don't wake up every day and feel passionate. Passion can be fleeting and therefore misleading. So now here's something that's interesting that I do believe with absolute certainty. I am in my dream job now, and I still don't wake up feeling passion every single day. But I'm fulfilled. So you can have fulfillment without passion. Passion's like the icing on the cake. It's really nice to have, but it's not required to have the cake, right? So I do happen to be passionate about what I do, but it's not everything that I do, right? Because we'll lose passion. When we have the advice of passion, you should do what you're passionate about. That can be so misleading. That can be so misleading. Just think in your head, anybody just off the top of your head, can you think about things that you're passionate about that you would never want to do for a living? Nobody, eh? Look at this group, yeah? Yeah, I mean, it's kind of crazy, isn't it? But this is what we hear. So, okay, so let's talk about why non-traditional. So during my time in corporate Calgary, being very successful but completely miserable, I saw 3 separate career development professionals. And all of them basically started in the same way. And I read a lot of books on the subject too, okay? So I want to be really clear. This doesn't mean bad. All it meant for me was that there was still a gap after I went through this, okay? I'm not bashing what we currently do. What I'm saying is, like all good science, or like your iPhone, right? You have an iPhone. 2 years later, they come out with another one. Does it make the last iPhone bad? No, it just means that there's things that they can do now that they didn't know to do before. And I think we're doing this a little bit in the career industry now, right? Science is the same way. Good research builds off good research, right? So my traditional experience was I'd go in, we'd have some conversation. I filled out a series of assessments. I got a list of job titles from those assessments, a little bit more conversation, and then I went out and did informational interviews to find my job. Anybody familiar with that, just out of curiosity? It's a pretty typical approach. Nothing wrong with it. Super valuable. I did discover new things, and it did lead me along a career path that matched my skills, my personality type, and my working style. But I was still unfulfilled. All of those things are external from who we are as people. All of those assessments, they're about us, but we use them as a way of categorizing people so that we can better give them advice. So I still use assessments in what I do as a career and life coach. I absolutely do. How I use them, though, is not for job placement. How I use them is to better understand how to work with my client to get them to do the job that they need to do. Okay? So I went through all that and something was still missing. So how could I go through that process 3 times in a 10-year period and still be unfulfilled? I remember, and some of you have done this yourselves, standing in the elevator lobby of some tall tower, and or maybe you're at the bus stop or wherever it is. I was standing in the bottom of the elevator lobby, and I'm thinking, I hope all 15 elevators are broken today. That didn't happen even once. In 10 years, not once, were all 15 broken. But there's a lot of pain associated with that. And I think if you look at some of the studies in science that are out there, which we'll talk a little bit about, people are not fulfilled by their jobs. Most of them aren't, actually. Like, less than 2 out of 10, less than about 17% are fulfilled by what they do completely. That's a really sad statistic. So what do we do about it? That's where I came up with the dream job evolution process. And this is the same process that I took myself through. This might be one of those ones that you want to take a picture of. So I'm going to go through this with you, one step at a time, and then we'll move on to other things. So the first thing we need to do, and by the way, when I go through this, I'm going to tell you, I'll tell you a couple of anecdotes and that kind of thing, but when we go through this, I'm going to share with you where I think people get stuck in this process. And we do it all the time, and you've seen your clients do it, you've seen your peers do it, your bosses, your kids, your leaders. The first thing that we have to do is stop. So if we use a driving analogy and we're lost and completely lost, because when you are unfulfilled in your career, this is often how you feel. You feel like you're completely lost and there isn't a roadmap in the world that is going to support you. So the best thing to do when you're lost is stop. It's really simple. Stop. Take stock. This will help you gain clarity. Instead of continuing to move and move and move, you know when people are lost in the forest, you know what they find? They just walk in circles. That's what they do. They walk in circles. They're almost never very far away from where they started, maybe 50 clicks. Right? So just stop. Find out where you are. Gain clarity. Identify the current state. What are the facts? That's the question that we need to ask. What are the facts of this situation? When I do this with my clients, I look at it subjectively and objectively. I'm doing both because that's how we operate as people. We're both. We're not just science and we're not just emotions. We're a combination of those two things. So you want to look at both. And I might be asking questions like, how do you want to be in this world? And what are your values and beliefs? Okay? We'll talk more about values and beliefs in a little bit here. Then, after we've stopped, we've gathered our supplies, which is just data gathering. It's literally about who am I as a person. Every aspect of your life. I look at every aspect of a client's life, not just their skills. Because there's lots of us in the room. Think about this for a second. Are there things, just by show of hands, that you are really amazing at that you never want to do again because it's so painful? Like for me, data entry. I'm really good at it, but I never want to do it again. See what I'm saying? There's a disconnect with how we're brought up. So once we have our data and we focus on what puts people in their peak state, then we can start to think. This is where we're like, okay, now that we have data, we can filter that data down and provide focus, and we can filter our ideal fit. That's where we're asking the question, what is important? So now that we have the data, what's important about the data? This is where we're actually saying, what do we already know to be true? And we're getting down to the task level. I'll give you more examples of this as we go along. Then we can start to move. So now that we've stopped, because we were lost, we've stopped, we've gathered data, we've started to filter that data, now we can go and actually start to move. That's where we can put the key back in the ignition, and maybe we start to move very slowly at first. So this is where we set our direction and our alignment. This is where we close the gaps. This is where you say, I'm an engineer, I want to be a doctor, and now we have a technical skills gap. So that's where I know now to close the gap. That's what gets the car moving forward, right? I'll be honest with you, 90% of the time with my clients, it's never a technical skills gap. It's almost always a psychological skills gap about whether or not they believe that they can do something, okay? And that's where we're asking, what are the steps? What are the steps? What are the things you actually have to do to close those gaps, okay? And then we might also, at that point, because we now have data, this kind of thing, we might actually be looking at a vision. It could be a short-term vision or a long-term vision for your whole life. But in that move stage, visions propel us forward. Visions are what get us through, right? As a business owner, I can tell you, if you're in your own individual practice or you've ever been a business owner in any capacity, you know how hard it can be some days, right? So what this does is having a vision can propel you through. A vision is what pulls you through those dark times so that you can say, okay, I can get through this. I just have to focus on my vision, right? That's how you get through those weak days. And then we adjust. So this is basically the first 3 steps over and over again, but not unconsciously. What we're doing is we're evaluating the results. So how did we do on those last 3 steps that we just took? How did we do on that? Is it working? Am I feeling more fulfilled in my life, in my career? And if we are, great. If we're not, we need to make little adjustments along the way, right? Was anybody in the last presentation breakout that was in this room? Yeah, he talked a lot about micro versus macro in terms of career development. What we're talking about here is that nano level, right? Where it's like, you might just change one little thing, which is this year, I'm going to try and get this thing off my plate, and someone else is going to do it because somebody else in the organization wants to do it, okay? And then, so this is where we tweak. This is our tweaking phase, and this is what makes it stick. This is how we keep momentum going. Now, the last box, it looks a little bit funny. It's called B. This is where we get a little bit softer. This is really a case for mindfulness and awareness. And the keynote speaker this morning, wasn't she incredible, by the way? Like, she was really good, really motivating, right? She talked about mindfulness. If this is a concept that you haven't heard of, you need to research it. It will change your life. I make most of my clients go through an 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction program. You learn how to breathe. You learn how to take the stuff that's flying at your face every day and say, isn't it interesting that when that happens, I get frustrated? It's like you take it and you just put it in front of you and you say, that's pretty cool, right? The science behind mindfulness-based stress reduction is solid. They've been researching it for the last 30 years. Go check it out. It's incredible. So really what we're doing here is we want to have a whole life experience. Remember, it's not just about the destination. We want to enjoy the journey too, right? Because usually when people get to the destination in their careers, lots of times they're still feeling unfulfilled. They're like, this is not what I thought it would be, right? So this is how we say, well, how can we make it what you want? By enjoying the journey along the way. This is where we celebrate and we ask the question, what now? Okay. So where I think most people get stuck in this is that they're thinking, think to the point of rumination sometimes. And then they adjust, think, adjust, but it doesn't actually mean they're moving. And you see this with people, right? They come in, they have that look on their face, they tell you their story, you offer some suggestions, then they continue to have that story, and they're like, yeah, but. And then they try adjusting something. Well, it's like, I'm unfulfilled, so I think I should go back to school. So they go back to school. And then they come out and they get another job and they're like, this is not what I thought it would be. But I thought it through. So you have to go through all of these, right? And the good news is that you can start at different places because people need different things at different times. That's why there's an arrow going both ways. You can be flexible in this process. That's the point of it. I'd like to spend more time on it, but I know I'm going to run out of time today if I do. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually have maybe a couple of volunteers help me hand out a couple of cards just so that you can reach out to me after. So I have, we got one here. Can I get another one? Thanks. So one is my business card, and the other one is a card that just lets you know about my book. I had actually intended on giving every single one of you my book. The issue is that it literally went on Amazon 2 weeks ago, and it's on Indigo as well, but I wasn't able to get them in time to give them to you. So they are on Amazon and Indigo. The ebook is your most cost-effective way of doing it, but they do have hard and soft cover as well. If you want to go through this process or know more about this, all of that information is in the book, which is accessible right now, because I know that I'm giving you way too much today. So where am I going here? All right. So we go through this process, and this is the process I had to take myself through. Of course, I didn't realize it until I was in hindsight, right? You realize it after the fact. So I went through this process, and I want to be really clear. This isn't the only way to do this. There are hundreds of thousands of ways to discover a career. This is one that I know works really well because it's intrinsically focused. It's about me and what's happening to me in this moment. And then I go out and say, now how does that fit with the rest of society? Is it a reality? Because you still have to do a reality check, right? So why is this important? Well, anybody here familiar with Marcus Buckingham, just by show of hands? Yeah, he's a cool guy. He knows his stuff. He's an incredible researcher. He'll tell you that 17% of people are fulfilled and satisfied by their jobs and feel like their jobs play to their strengths. 17%. That leaves a whopping 83% of people who are not. This was a Gallup poll that was done with 2 million people. So if you're a researcher, you know that 2 million people is not insignificant. That's a massive sample size. It's huge. Why else is this important? What is the problem that we're facing? Right? One of the things that was in the outcomes is that I was going to tell you why job dissatisfaction is at an all-time high. So those are the list of jobs that fit my Myers-Briggs personality type. I did one Google search, went to the very first web page, and that's what came up. What do I do with that? That's insane. Look at that. There's nearly 100 jobs on there, and that was the first website. Right? So this is what's happening to Generation Y and Generation Z. Z? We're in Canada. Right? Z? Z? Oh. Z, thank you. I'll get there. So this is what's happening. 100 years ago, you would do what your parents did, or you would do the best education that your money could afford, and lots of times geography played a huge role in it, right? That's what we would do. And then technology comes along and the internet comes along. So prior to those things, it's like walking into a fancy restaurant. You've got 5 choices of mains: chicken, fish, beef, vegetarian, or pasta. What are you going to choose? Pretty simple, right? Now, it's like walking into a Denny's, and this is our list of choices, and we're not going to read the whole menu because we don't, and to be honest, as far as job search goes, that's impossible. So typically, when we walk into a Denny's, we just keep getting the same thing that we've always gotten. So this is why people stay stuck in their jobs, right? This is why those that haven't even started the career journey are so overwhelmed that they seem ungrateful, because the boomers worked their butts off for us, right? The Xers, they fell in line. They did what they were supposed to. They made it easier for their kids. They did. And technology came along, and that was part of that work, and it really supported it, and it made a huge difference. And now our menu of options is this big. There are 5 billion people working on Earth right now. 5 billion, okay, give or take. That's about 70% of the world's population. So far, there are 5 billion different ways of doing a job and counting. How do you make a choice? So we have to remove, for a while, not forever, the job title from the initial career search. We have to remove the job title from the initial career search. We come back to that later because we have to get practical, right? The world still works with job titles. We have to remove it and do that intrinsic search first. All right. So let's do some myth busting. I promised you that we'd bust 5 myths today, things that get in the way of people discovering what their job fit should be. The first one is life's purpose. So similar offenders to this are, I'm looking for that one job that's the right fit, right? And for every person, there is a dream job out there. You just have to go. And I think those are really wonderful as long as they're keeping you motivated in the right way and not discouraged, right? The reality is, though, is that some people have a really clear vision about what they want to do. Some people have a less clear vision of what they want to do. And some people have no idea at all. And the point is that we need to make all of those okay. And I already mentioned the job titles, right? Statistically, it's an impossibility for you to have only one job fit on Earth. There are lots, which is part of the problem, but let's bust that myth, right? I don't think that that's true at all anymore. There is no such thing. The one thing I will say is that there is something called perceived calling. And so this is for your clients who are spiritual or religious in nature. And they say, I have been called to do blank, and we need to honor that as well. It doesn't mean that they wake up and love their job every day, right? But it is something that we want to be mindful of. So that would be something that trumps this, is when somebody feels like I have a higher power or a higher source or some kind of collective consciousness that's telling me that this is the work I'm supposed to do. There is a test that you can take. It's called a motivation map. I think the speaker was supposed to be here this afternoon talking about that. I think she's the one that had to back out. It can tell you whether or not you're authentically motivated by money. And what I can tell you is I have not met one person, and I've done over 100 of those assessments in the last 2 years. I haven't met one person authentically motivated by money. I've had people come close, but very, very rare. And we talked about job titles a little bit, but let's look at this again. Job titles are misleading. Job titles are so misleading. In my company, I let people choose their title. Now, to a certain extent, okay? So it wouldn't make sense for us to have 5 CEOs. The public face of that doesn't make sense. But I do have somebody in my company called a relationship wizard. Why? Because he works magic with relationships, personal relationships, business partner relationships, all the rest of it. I have somebody else in my company who is the self-help addicts coach. Okay. I have somebody called a chief operating officer for hire, right? I call myself a dream job matchmaker, right? The point is that they're so misleading. So let's just look at a couple of these. I like plumber's assistant. So these are my job titles, by the way, the jobs that I've held in my life. Plumber's assistant is one of my favorite because there is some kind of impression that you'd have that I'd have a certain set of qualifications or skills. But I was 16 years old and I was running snaking cable and I had no qualifications or skills, but gee, that was on my resume for the next 5 years, right? This one I love absolutely. Movie rental rep. This one kills me. What did I do? What do you think I did? I did work at Blockbuster. Yeah. And what did I do at Blockbuster? Yeah, cashier. I rented movies. That was part of my job. Do you know that I spent 90% of my time dusting shelves and vacuuming? 90% of my time. Misleading. This one's my favorite. This is my favorite title of all of them. Business analyst. What does a business analyst do? Like, there's an international standard through the International Institute of Business Analysts. There's a whole process. I can tell you most companies, except for maybe their IT departments, don't follow what the IIBA says, right? Business analyst is like a different kind of dumping ground for more advanced administrative work, right? And I don't say that in a derogatory way. I started my career as an administrator, as an admin, and I loved being an admin. But the truth is that those are the ones that pick up the pieces. They're the ones that save the day, right? And business analysts can do the same. Sometimes it's reporting, sometimes it's facilitating, like, good luck. So if you give me a list of job titles and say business analyst is on the list of job titles, you might want to go explore that. How am I even going to conduct an informational interview on a business analyst and get an apples to apples comparison? You can't. I did this. I went into being a business analyst because I went out and interviewed a business analyst and I interviewed another one, both in the same company, and I thought, this is what I want to do. I got my first business analyst job and I'm like, this isn't what this is supposed to be, right? Didn't make any sense. So I'd like to bust that myth too about money and job titles. All right, so how about this one? There is no such thing as a dream job, perfect job fit, right? This one I hate too. Right? What I hate more is when you hear that everybody has to work, suck it up, go get a job. Well, there is some truth to that if you have a 25-year-old living in your basement that's not doing anything except playing video games, right? So maybe that's what needs to happen. But the point is that dream jobs do exist, and here's what we know about the power of belief, and this is a well-researched fact, okay? That if you believe that it's possible, then you will find it. Right? Or you at least have the potential of finding it. If you do not believe it's possible, you're not even going to look. This is what they say about optimism versus pessimism. Optimists will never hit their goal, or it's very rare. Optimists, they will almost never hit it. They're very inaccurate in how they approach the world and their projection into the future. Okay? Pessimists are a little bit more accurate, not even a little bit, quite a bit more accurate in their estimation of the world. We need both. We need accurate people, okay? But the optimist will always go further than the pessimist because they think that they should. So I can tell you, for somebody who's building a bridge that I'm going to drive over, I don't need this person. I need this person, right? But when it comes to me achieving my dreams or my financial advisor or positions like that, I need that person. Do you see what I'm saying? There's a huge difference here. This plays into this absolutely. I'd like to bust that myth too because I think it's not true. This one, I will always be happy in my dream job. We've kind of talked about this already, so I don't need to belabor the point. The point is that change is constant, period. If you get a job and you're happy with it and you're not expecting it to change, I promise you'll be miserable for the rest of your life because it's going to change. Our coworkers change, where we sit changes, our job title changes, how much we make changes, the economy changes. Welcome to Alberta, right? Lots of these people that thought they had like rock solid positions. Maybe in 2005, we made it through 2008 in Alberta. We did not make it through this year, right? It's been tough. So you're not always going to be happy, so you constantly have to do things to evolve. So that myth is busted too. So let's talk about what a dream job is. I'm just going to be mindful of the time here. So a dream job, in my estimation, through what I went through, is based off of three key things. One is your 6 human needs, and we're going to walk through that in detail. So this is not based off Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Nothing wrong with it. I love that model. There are some things that you can poke holes in there, like there are people who have self-actualization through fasting, and fasting is and food is at the bottom of the rung, but self-actualization is at the top, right? So I'm not bashing it. I love it. I use it all the time. This is just different. If you know Tony Robbins' work, he talks a lot about the 6 human needs. It's made up of that, our personal values and beliefs, and 80% of our day-to-day tasks are in the peak state. They put us in a peak state. So we'll define what that is. Okay? So let's talk about this in a little bit more detail. So we have the 6 human needs. There we go. The first need is certainty. And your clients will value these differently. They need them all. We all need them all, but your clients will value them differently. So I have a client who highly values certainty. When I took her through those 3 little circles, which took us about 6 months to do it properly and accurately, okay, we went through that, she realized something. She says, I'm absolutely in my dream job. The issue is I have no certainty because everything is changing. But if I could find a way of getting certainty or perceiving certainty, then I can stay in this job. If I can't get that because it's my #1 value right now, then I know I have to leave. Do you see what I'm saying? So what this does is it really pinpoints what is actually happening, because when people are dissatisfied with their jobs or unfulfilled and they start talking about it, they start talking about, well, I'm unfulfilled because of this and I'm unfulfilled because of that and this and that, my boss is a jerk, so they leave and they go into another job and it's like, I'm still unfulfilled, but it's different this time. What happened? So the purpose behind those 3 circles is to pinpoint exactly what it is that is getting in the client's way. So I go through this with my clients in a very detailed way. So we have certainty. This is our need to know that, that we have confidence that we are moving in one direction or another, right? For me, I don't value certainty very high, right? Being a business owner, it's hard to be a business owner and value and have certainty as your first value. It's possible, it's just harder, right? For me, I just need to know I'm sitting at the same desk every day. I know it sounds kind of funny, but being a former administrator, if my pens are not in the same place, somebody's going to pay. Okay. Some people, it's like I need to know everything, right? We also require variety, which is our need for uncertainty, right? So this is our need for mental stimulation, right? Significance. We all have a basic human need to feel significant. We want to feel important. Right? We want to stand out. We want to be worthy of attention. We want to know we did a good job. Love and connection is the next one. Love and connection. So we might not get a lot of love at work, right? You might, I don't know. But connection, we want to know that we connect with people. There is science around the hormonal response for men and women when we have a sense of community. So we need to feel connected to people. It's absolutely required. 5 is growth. So this is our need to know that we can grow and expand and broaden our horizons. And 6 is contribution. This is so key and it's so often overlooked. If we are not contributing to something outside of ourselves, something bigger than ourselves, if we're just doing it for us, we're not going to be successful. You have to contribute to something outside of yourself. Now, right away, people will often think about volunteer work, right? This kind of thing. Look at some of the best contributors in our world, Martin Luther King, right? Mother Teresa, Gandhi, right? It doesn't have to be that big. It can be as simple as, I'm going to contribute to my family by being the best dad I can possibly be, which means I'm just going to turn my cell phone off the second I walk in the house for the first 15 minutes. And they get all my time. I did that with my relationship. I don't have kids. I did that with my relationship. That was a game-changing moment. It turned my relationship around by turning my cell phone off for 15 minutes when I walked in the door, right? So that's a way that I can contribute, right? Sometimes it's big, sometimes it's small. It doesn't have to be big. I just want to be very clear about that. So I ask my clients, we go through this and we say, which one's is work meeting right now? And if it's not being met at work, where is it being met? And we go through and we document it and we check it off and we say, okay, cool. Now, which one do you value the most? Right? By the way, those 6 human needs, they're met either way. They can be met in a positive way or a negative way. They can be met consciously or they can be met unawares. Right? Talk to somebody who's a drug addict, and I can say this with absolute confidence. Do they have certainty as a drug addict? Absolutely they do. They have certainty because they know that same old feeling. They know exactly what they're getting. They know the community they're getting into. Do they get variety? Oh yeah, hugely, right? That's pretty self-explanatory. Can you feel significant? Yeah, totally, especially when all of your friends are drug users too, which also meets the love and connection need, right? You're connecting. Do they feel like they're growing? Yes. They feel like they're growing. That is one of the needs that absolutely gets met by being an addict. And how about contribution? Yeah, if you're contributing to your community and you're contributing in a meaningful way, and maybe you just help your buddy because he doesn't have any, and so you're going to give him some, these can be met either way. So the idea with my clients is that I want to make sure that they're met in a conscious way, so they're aware of how they're being met, because they're always being met. Let's talk about personal values. How am I doing for time? I got 10 minutes, so I got to speed up. Okay, so personal values and beliefs. So these are the things, values are the things that we determine to be important, okay? Makes sense. It's what you consider to be worthwhile and how you operate. It's your principles, okay? How do we go through career development and not know these things? Don't you think it's important to know what people consider to be worthwhile and how they operate for them to find a job that's meaningful to them? I mean, that seems so obvious, doesn't it? But we miss it, right? And that's okay. And maybe you don't in your practice. I know that when I first started, I certainly did, right? I don't know how we can disconnect it, though. And sometimes we end up with conflicting values or a belief that conflicts with our values. So like stealing bread for a starving family, right? That's a conflicting value that you might have, right? Loving your boss but seeing him do something unethical, or earning a living with a steady job versus taking a risk to do something you absolutely love, maybe starting a business, right? These things come up, and so what I do with my clients is we document their values and beliefs around work and life and money and family, and then we go through them just like we do the 6 human needs, and we say, which of these are being met right now, which are in conflict, and which ones are most important to you right now in your life, because it changes. If somebody says, I know I'm not authentically motivated by money, but money's really important to me right now, and I suspect it will be most of my life, there's a really simple answer. You need to go get a PhD and write a bunch of papers and get the highest paying job that you can. Really simple, right? And I'm being a little bit sarcastic here. I mean, obviously I wouldn't just say that, right? But that's the point. If you say that that's all that it's about, and then usually they're like, well, I don't want to go back to school. Okay, then it's not just about money, right? There's more in there, right? What about beliefs? What are beliefs? So this is your blueprint. This is what you learned growing up, and it's how you grew up. It's what you believe to be true as a result of those experiences and teachings. And your values and your beliefs together are your modus operandi, which basically means this is your mode of operation, right? This is your mode of operation. We need to understand this if we're going to help people find their jobs, right? If we don't understand how they operate, how are we going to place them in the right position? This is where you might start to look at assessments and say, okay, how do those things play into what the client is doing? And then the last one here is, I like to say a minimum of 80% of your day-to-day tasks have to put you in a peak state or drive you through your personal vision. So sometimes our tasks don't put us in a peak state, but if our vision is big enough, we'll do whatever it takes. We'll get dragged through the mud if it gets us to our vision, okay? So let's talk about that. How do we do that? Peak state might not be what you're good at. If you had more of this in your day, it would fill you up, make you feel better, give you enough energy at the end of the day to spend time with family, go to the gym, relax, feel good that you accomplished something. Basically, it leaves you feeling fulfilled with energy. I want to be really clear. This is at the task level, right? So on the weak state side, we're not going to say, well, Susie Bell, she's my boss and she's a real jerk and that drains me. That's a value. That's a belief. That doesn't belong in this part of the activity. This is about tasks. It's about the doing. Talking to people is a task. Talking to people about what, right? Doing data entry is a task. Accounts payable, accounts receivable, those are tasks, but those tasks have massive subtasks under them. I have people that are like, I like this part of accounts payable and hate that part of accounts payable, right? And so for where it's relevant, you want to break this down. My example of this is public speaking. Wasn't very good at it, still maybe not great at it, but we're getting through. We're okay, right? We might be on time, okay? And the weak state. So it might not be what you're bad at, right? You might be really good at things that completely drain you. If you had less of this in your day, it would make your day better. It would fill you up, right? If you want to look at it conversely, you could say, if I had more of this in my day, it would drain me. Right? It leaves you feeling drained and tired. These tasks leave you feeling drained and tired. It's like, oh, I can't wait till this. If you're like one of those people that has to do month-end activities and you're like, oh God, month-end is coming up, that should probably go on the weak state side, right? If you're like, yeah, month-end, I save that work, right? That's what my admin does. She's like, I love going through the bookkeeping stuff, and I'm like, have at her, right? And my example of that would be the corporate communications. Really good at it, but completely drain me. So where are we at here? We got 5 more minutes. So this is just a summary of those particular pieces, okay? This is a good time to take a picture. I'll give you a second to take a picture if you'd like to take a picture. So once they've, by the way, that job tasks piece, I call it a job fit filter. And it's in the book. It actually takes you through, that last little circle is actually a 5-step process that takes you through that whole thing that really helps your clients broaden what they know that they've done and how they feel about it. And it narrows it down into 3 to 5 filters, both on their peak state and weak state side. And that's how they go out and start to look for work. And they start to look from that intrinsic place of, I know this fills me up. Okay, and this doesn't. So when I might not go show a potential employer, but I might sit down and say, I'm curious, how much detailed sort of day-to-day work is, repetitive day-to-day work is required in this position, because that's on my weak side, right? That's on the things that drain me. I might go ask that, and they're like, well, about 80% of your day will be the same from one day to the next. Okay, I'm gonna take off out of that interview, right? So it's more meaningful interviewing. You're not just asking, tell me about the day-to-day of this job. You're deliberately saying, regardless of the day-to-day of this job, do I get to stand in front of a stage and help people overcome obstacles to achieve their dreams? How much of that is part of what they do? And if they're like, oh, well, that's 80% of your job, you'll find me in that position, right? Do you see what I'm saying? So it's more deliberate interviewing when you are interviewing them, and it provides you with better questions because they're based off you as opposed to just you doing what you know is a good idea to make you stand out as a candidate. It's deliberate. You're actually looking for fit. Okay? This, of course, all of that is trumped if you are unemployed and you need a job. You need to go get a job first. Then you can influence. Okay? Oh, that did not turn out on that slide. Okay. This is what happens when you go from a Mac to a PC. What that says is take imperfect inspired action. And what I said to you at the start of this presentation is that I wanted to leave you with 2 things, okay? And I do this with my clients too, right? So I want to remind them that if they wait for perfection, they will never get there. If you wait to feel confident, you will not feel confident. Believe it or not, confidence and pride comes from a hormonal response. It's called serotonin. And you can activate serotonin through taking actions that would make you feel confident. So if you're like, hey, I want to be on this stage next year, but I'll wait until I feel confident, you'll never do it. Instead, get on this stage, and that serotonin response will happen, and you will feel pride and confidence. It's incredible. So I tell that to my clients. I told you 2 things that I wanted for you by the end of this, either to learn something new or to reinforce something that you already know. And if that's happened, can I just get you to raise your hand? And if it didn't happen for you and you didn't learn anything, that's okay. Please put something on the feedback forms. I'd love to know how we could do it better. I also was hoping that I would leave you feeling inspired and ready to take action. And the best way to lock in learning is to take imperfect inspired action, to do something as soon as the session is over that will lock in the learning that you have. So I don't know, how many of you were at the conference last year? Did anybody see Ryan Clements? He was the TED Talk guy. Okay, he has a TED Talk. Yeah, he's a pretty cool guy, right? So he talked a lot about what they don't teach you about career fulfillment in school. He talked about grit and fortitude to try something different and do something different. He talked about his fear of being hit in the face, which to me is a really reasonable fear to have. But he talked about his fear of being hit in the face, and he says fear, on the other side of fear is where success is. On the other side of fear is where success is. So he went and took a martial arts so he could learn to be hit in the face. I don't know why, but that's what he did, right? And so I was feeling so inspired. I actually walked out of that room and I picked up the phone, and what nobody knew at that time is that I had a long-standing fear of flying. Not just flying, just takeoff. There's moments in takeoff that just bring me to that complete panic place. So I picked up the phone, I called Springbank Airport, and I booked myself a flying lesson. So here's a picture of me peeing my pants. I'm actually flying the plane, okay? One of those little guys that you're not sure isn't going to tip over at any given time, okay? So I went through and did that. So I'm curious, What is one thing that you need to do today before the end of the day? Something that you've been thinking about, and maybe you can't do all of it, right? Maybe you want to hit the gym. Maybe it's making a phone call to somebody. Maybe it's repairing a relationship. Maybe it's just doing something a little bit different. What is one thing that you know that you need to do, something you've been avoiding or something you haven't got to? What is one little step, just a little step that you can take today that will move you in the right direction? We've heard a lot about this today already, depending which sessions you were in. So please write that down, and thank you very much.